You know how Carlisle plays PoE and I play PoE?
Yes.
Our starter builds for this league are Trapt builds. I'm not kidding you.
Yep.
Based on this game.
No,
No,
it was coincidence.
A coincidence. We even independently decided on our builds, and we ended up with
Yeah.
the same one.
Right, it's Trapt City. It's the year of the Trapt.
It's the year of the Trapt.
Welcome to New Game Plus. This is a retro gaming podcast where three guys spend 7 days playing one old game and then we talk about it. My name's Dustin.
I'm not Kenny.
Nolan.
And this is episode 359. And as you might have picked up, that's not Kenny.
That's not Kenny.
That
Word.
is the one and only Carlisle joining us as the third Ender.
Welcome, Carlisle. Thanks for filling in.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, everybody. It's been a little bit, but not that long. Happy holidays and all that. The guys realized they could use an extra hand, so here I am.
Absolutely.
Yes. I think Kenny's at the lake. It's frozen over. He might be ice skating on it.
Ice skating.
but-
Figure skating.
Yeah. Ooh, he would
Yeah.
be good at that.
So community member, Discord mod, host of What Am I Podcasting For, friend of the show, and friend of you, Carlisle, is joining us as our third this week. We're excited to have you, Carlisle. It looks like Square Enix is making a move due to our recent game of the week when we talked about Final Fantasy VI.
Sure. Yes.
It's been reported this past week that ESRB ratings for each of the Pixel Remaster games have appeared on the ESRB website and subsequently have disappeared. So, what does it mean?
What does that mean?
Carlisle, tell us what it means.
I mean, I'd assume that what that means is that they at least went through the process of getting it rated, which means at some point they were sure considering it, but they probably didn't intend for that information to get out that way. It's about time. We got the Switch ports and stuff of those games. You look at them and you're like, yeah, this was probably made for Switch in the first place. Why isn't it?
Wait, so, sorry, those games are already out?
Yeah, they've been
Yes.
on mobile and PC and Steam and stuff for quite a
Exclusively,
while.
yeah.
And none
And
of the
this is
consoles.
just for Sony? Okay.
Yeah,
I got you.
I've wanted them for Switch immediately. Obviously, like those are the perfect kind of like travel
They
games.
were
Perfect
on
kind of like.
Switch.
No, they haven't been on Switch.
Everybody's been
Like-
confused by it.
What's driven me mad is that I've played Final Fantasy 9 and I know that Final Fantasy 10 is available on Switch in some of those, but not these original 6. They've not been on Switch.
That's the perfect platform for them. They need to stop. They're gonna do it though. This leak or whatever, that they're gonna do it. They didn't change their minds, I don't think.
No, they didn't change their mind, but it was either they're going to do it or
Sure.
they never were, and something happened. But that
Yeah,
doesn't
maybe.
make sense. But that doesn't really make sense.
No, it's coming. It's coming to consoles. You heard it here first. We have a partnership with Mr. Square, and
Okay.
he told us
And
it's
Miss
going.
Enix?
It's going to PS4. I don't know.
Well, part of me wants to believe it, but part of me doubts it's happening. Which, by the way, don't spell part backwards because it's a trap. Like in our retro game of the week,
What about the other
Trapt.
Overview.
Trapt is an action strategy game released on the PlayStation 2 in 2005. Its developer and publisher are Tecmo. And I believe this is a first on the show for a couple things, but this is a weird thing about this game. This is the only game I've ever known that we've played that was a sequel to another game in Japan which was called Deception 3, but was rebranded in the West as an entirely new IP, not a sequel. It was just like, hey, this is a new IP. And for those of you that are curious, it's called Kagaru 2 in Japan, and it's part of an established series, actually, that Tecmo has put out that has very similar games. This is not the first in the series. This is actually the fourth, I believe, in Japan. but the first that we got in America for this series.
Yeah. I think they've done stuff like this before where they need to brand something differently for the US, or they're bringing it over later. Like, I mean, even with Final Fantasy VI recently, I don't like talking about it because I hate how people are like, do you mean Final Fantasy 3 or Final Fantasy 6? Because now it's Final Fantasy 6. It's clear.
Sure.
But something similar there in that they didn't bring over some of them. So like it just gets it gets muddy, and so I think that something similar was happening here, but bringing it over as an entirely new IP, I think that was a smart decision, probably.
Yeah, I mean, how many people at home have heard of Temco's Deception? I hadn't, and I've been gaming for like a couple decades now.
That's the thing, Garlic. We were freaked out when you found out the name of the game, and you're like, I've never heard of this. We were like, that means, what does that mean?
Yeah, almost every game that we randomize and gets picked for the show, Garla has some kind of experience with. So for you to know nothing shook us to the core.
Yeah. And I do think it was smart. I agree with you, Dustin, because you kind of need context for the rest of the series to be like, oh yeah, this is Kagura 2. Everyone would be like, what? So, fine. New IP in America. I've never heard of a game like this. As the name suggests, you are literally laying traps for enemies to walk into. Oh, a tower defense game, you mean? Nope. Something else.
Similar.
Kind of.
I mean,
it's something else.
The best way I can think of to phrase it is that this is playable Home Alone, but with a gothic atmosphere to it.
Yeah, I mean,
the Home Alone comparison cracks me up, but it's also true. You play as Allura, a princess that has been framed for the murder of her father, the king. The evil stepmother witnesses the murder, but screams and insists that it was Allura who made a deal with the devil, so to speak. So then you run away and you go into hiding, being led by a demonic voice in your head that is granting you strange powers. Was stepmother right? And asking for human souls to consume. So what do? You lay traps. Set up.
Just your normal everyday Friday. I mean,
it felt like an RPG at first to me, but no, it's not. It's a trap. It's a trapper.
And even though this is a part of a series, I believe that the stories are standalone. So there might be some kind of connection, like you're in the same world or something. But they
are standalone, from what I understand. But also, this game is almost a like straight up ripoff of the story of the first two games. Like it's like people were like, why are they just retelling the story in a weirdly, like just slightly different way? So.
Gameplay.
We said Home Alone, and it's silly.
Wait, Lost in New York or one?
One. Oh, for sure.
One.
Because Lost in New York, you're moving all throughout New York.
It's his uncle's house, and it's abandoned. It's not quite the same.
So
maybe it is Lost in New York.
It's Christmas time right now. It's snowing outside of my house. So imagine Kevin McAllister as a scantily clad woman who is a princess. Imagine Harry and Marv and a lot of other wet bandits,
scantily clad,
but with big weapons, slowly coming into the house, the McAllister's house. And imagine instead of beads on the floor and
cars and like swinging paint buckets.
Instead of that,
kind of though.
Kind of. Instead of that, imagine massive like boulders rolling down stairs and spikes on the wall to impale your enemies and bear traps to clamp onto their feet. That's what this game is.
Yes, and I can't really come up with a better way to describe it because it's not like any game I've ever played.
Oh,
really? And that's really saying something because I've played a lot of games and I'm aware of a lot of games, but like you're not punching. I mentioned this in the first play. You're not punching. You don't have a sword. You don't have power. I mean, you have powers, but no, you are arranging a room to make these idiot enemies fall into obvious traps. Okay, I'm here for it, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if I'd call them idiots long term, because one of the things I did want to mention is as you get further into this game, the enemies actually start getting smarter. Like, you'll put down your traps in specific places, and then you have to run away and you lure the enemies into them. But oftentimes, after an enemy's allure your enemies into them, fine. After your enemies have actually seen those traps go off, though, whether it's on a friend or like you missed with them, they'll actually start like dodging around them and finding other ways to get to you, and you'll have to move your traps and reset them and come up with new configurations. It's actually kind of clever for the fact that literally all you have the ability to do is set traps and activate them.
And then some enemies are resistant to certain types of traps. So like if they're heavily armored, they might not be affected by bear traps or different things like this. And you've got different enemy types. Everything from like your typical like thief and warrior and knight to bowmen and women to like magic casters to healers to like a whole range.
A lot of RPG elements. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The tropes are there, right? But it's just not the same style of game.
And it plays drastically different. So imagine this. You are given a little playground where you're running around in third person, but at any time you can press a button and go into this overhead grid mode where you can see the full layout of the room. And you use, it's kind of interesting. I mean, no game I played is like this.
I think it's really interesting. Yeah.
You use the buttons on your PlayStation, X, square, and triangle, to place floor, wall, and ceiling traps that you've equipped beforehand. You've got a pre-mission screen, and you can buy, build, and equip traps. And then out of those that you've equipped, you can set those traps in that mode using... It's X for floor, which is interesting because it's also kind of the layout of the controller. Square for your wall traps, and triangle, which is the top button for your ceiling traps. And you set those, and then there's a charge time. When you go back into the normal mode, it's charge time as the enemies are walking around. You allure them. Allure.
You're gonna do that the whole time.
Well, I am, but that's why they named her that, right? Like,
I guess it didn't click with me until you said that. But if they did,
really?
Boo.
Well, but I guess that's not the name in Japanese, so I don't know. Interesting.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. But I said the the enemies are idiots, and yes, they get better. You're also an idiot because you can walk into your own traps.
Nolan, in your
I
first
absolutely
play?
can.
Well, okay, I still don't know what that was in my first
really?
play. What happened?
Okay.
What happened?
Well, I'll explain. But
okay.
Not only are you using your traps, but you have traps that are in the room or things in the room that can become traps if you use them correctly. And then you have what, Nolan, you actually accidentally, I don't know how you did it. I'll have to go back and watch. You procced, but I ended up using that trap regularly because in most rooms there's something called a dark illusion. It's a mega trap, and they're the best. And
it's a murder machine.
You have to do something in the room that unlocks that trap, and then you have to lure your enemies into a particular spot. For that area, you have to light one of the candles by using one of your traps near it. I don't know what you did, but you...
How did I do that?
You lit a candle. I don't know what you did.
Oh my gosh.
And then,
I was shooting the flaming arrow from the wall, so I guess I hit
that. It must have just lined up with a candlestick. And
oh my gosh.
Then instead of luring your opponents onto the rug, the bloodied rug, you stepped onto it, and it
guys.
And then it's ludicrous what happens.
It doesn't end. It's one of those. It's like the jokes where like something insane happens. You're like, you laugh really hard, and then there's like a long gap, and you're like, that was funny, and then it keeps going and does something even worse, where like my body gets ground up into gears, but then I get spit out in one piece, dude. It was so funny, and I was like, what's going on? It is such a mess, dude. And that was a tutorial stage, guys. Like, I was not ready for this game at all. I didn't know what I was doing.
Garlisle, I know, I believe that you got further than both of us this week. Probably anyone that played along with us. You used some dark illusions. We talked about it throughout. Were there any dark illusions that you particularly liked? And the reason why I'm talking about this is because I loved the dark illusions. They're so cinematic and ridiculous. Over the top.
Normally, when you set off a trap in this game on an enemy, it like freeze frames on the enemy getting like wailed by this giant rock or something for a moment so you can appreciate it. These dark illusions are like 30-second cutscenes.
Yeah.
I think the one I came to like was one in one of the later stages. You have to electrify the water in order to get a water wheel to go crazy. Then you knock an enemy into it, and they get flung by the water wheel onto this hook that ends up being over a pit that apparently has like a giant alligator thing in it that just comes up and drags them down. Like, that is the kind of over the top that this game sometimes goes for.
That's good. That's great.
Listen to this one, Nolan. This one was my favorite. It's in the Belfry, so you can slowly unlock rooms, and in between missions, when you're buying traps, you can also buy keys and unlock certain rooms in the mansion. I unlocked the Belfry, and is what you do. You can go in there, and you have to use a trap, one of your traps, to knock down the bell that's hanging. And if the bell is knocked down, then there's a spot that you can lure an enemy onto, and when they step on that spot, chains from the columns come out and latch onto your opponent and launches you up through the bell tower. Like, takes you all the way up outside, throws you into the sky, and then lightning strikes you, and then you fall all the way back down. It's so good. So
if this game wasn't crazy enough, they were like, let's add fatalities.
Pretty much.
Exactly.
And they did. What, dude? Can you figure those things out on your own, or is that all like I have to look this up? Because again,
you
had no
figured
clue
out
how
one?
I triggered mine. No, I didn't.
Yeah,
Like,
some of them are pretty well hidden. Definitely, like, the first one's pretty easy. Like, the condition is literally just light a candle, which there's a good chance you do that by accident at some point. And you can notice, hey, one of the other candles in the room is already lit up, yada yada. And one thing you do start to notice in this game is stuff does act the way you expect it to. Like, if it says, like, it's a pillar or whatever when you're doing the room highlights, yeah, you can probably knock that over onto people. But some of them are very complex. There's one that to trigger it, you have to, like, use a trap that shakes a wall to drop a head down. It rolls down the stairs, and halfway through that, you have to knock it down in another direction with another trap, and hit an enemy that's waiting for you at the bottom, which somehow you have to have an enemy at the bottom of the stairs waiting for you, because if they're not there right when the head reaches the bottom, it doesn't trigger the dark illusion. So, yeah.
Is the dark illusion the head falls on his head and then he has a head on his head? Oh, no. Like, okay, that brings up a good point, though, about combos. And the game really revolves around, like, or let me put it this way. Mastery of this system comes down to how well you can start comboing enemies. At least you'll be fine not doing that. Like, you'll just get one hit, reset, do it again. But the satisfaction of this game, I think, is found when you really start to like put together traps in a way that just KOs an enemy in a really sick way. And I never quite got to the point where I felt like I had mastered it. Not even close. But I was pulling off some stuff, and it felt really good. And so, to me, the game really requires a lot of investment in learning some of the physics going on. I use physics loosely. Some of the stuff is really silly, and it's PS2. But the combo system, what did you guys think about it? Did you get good at it?
I definitely got better at it. The game encourages and rewards you in doing that. It gives you more money to spend on traps and keys, and then it also does more damage. And so you want to combo. Like I early on would find a combo that worked for me, and it would work stage to stage. And so like my favorite combo, just trap combo alone, would be something like either a bear trap or a little floor launcher that would move them into a certain spot, and then I would use my what is a swinging blade from the ceiling?
Pendulum.
Pendulum. I would either use that to hit them again or hit a column often, which would come down and crush them. So I would do like a 2 or 3 combo often. But one of the things that I would often do is use those in tandem with the stage traps. So like
Yes.
you can there's a torture chamber that has an electric chair, easy to get them into, or there's like a wall grinder that it was easy to throw them into. And so I would use some kind of combination of traps to do that. So Garlisle, what was like your go-to trap setup to get combos?
By the end of the game, the one that I ended up using a lot, and partially because in the final room there's almost nothing else to use. The final stage is very brutal. Use a launch pad to throw them into the wall. Use a like spear trap in the wall to grab them and pull them the rest of the way while dealing damage, and then just drop a giant iron ball on their head.
You see what I'm saying? Like, the game really rewards creativity and experimentation in a way that other games can't quite achieve. And what I love about what this game does is you can pull all that off, what Garlisle just said, with 3 buttons. Very simple, just timing. That's great. That's really good, I think, in terms of like setting up a game to have an interesting combo system that's not put in a direction and then hit a button at a certain time like a fighting game would. And another thing that I think they did a really good job with is prepping for stages. You have a Fire Emblem style like battle preparation screen before you go into a stage where you can buy traps, and they do a good job of letting you know what the trap's going to do. It even has an animation of, what the thing does. And you kind of like, you prep there, you can do like side missions there, but and it also lets you look at the stage. So I really like the setup of like, it kind of is tower defense in that you prep, and then when you get in there, the control scheme is very simple. It's just run around, and then when they get in the right spot, boom, boom, boom.
The thing that I was nervous about at first is I thought they were going to all be like single use. You have to purchase your traps all over again in between stages, because that's not good for me, because I conserve money in real life and in fake life. And so like I wouldn't have been spending any money, but knowing that I could not only use the same traps between stages, you can use the same trap over and over again for the most part. There's some traps that are only single use in one instance, but you're not wasting money. So like once you buy a trap, you have that trap unlocked for as long as you need to or want to use it. So then it again encourages exploration to like figure out what traps work for you. And I believe, Garlisle, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that you can only unlock future traps by purchasing some of the previous traps. Or is it like time based? You get far enough in chapters. Which one is it?
I think it's a little bit of both. Some of the stuff is unlocked by buying other stuff with like invisible skill tree that the game doesn't show you type of stuff. And then there is a bunch of stuff that's unlocked upon beating certain stages or seeing certain endings. Because this game does actually have multiple endings and a new game plus, and each different ending does unlock a different trap for you in future playthroughs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which, let me explain just a little bit, because we haven't even talked about the game yet. The game is watching the cutscenes in between.
Bro.
Because that's the majority of what you're doing here.
Well, no, this is a problem. I mean,
well,
you're not exaggerating. No, it is a major problem when the story is this bland. You liked the story?
Yeah.
Please stop. You really do get a couple minutes of gameplay. Now, if you're struggling on a stage, that's going to be much longer.
Not much.
But well, it just depends if you're me.
Yeah, I guess.
But realistically, let's say you play a stage for 3 to 5 minutes, maybe 10. Then it's time to watch another cutscene. Like, there are literally like 5 cutscenes in between stages. That's a problem for me.
Well, and your timing is even interesting, because like I wrote down that I'm playing the battle. I'm playing most stages. It's got an in-game timer, and so it shows you might play a little bit longer because you're actually in like build mode. But like some of these missions I would complete in 20 to 30 seconds. Some a minute and a half. Some 2 to 3 minutes. But then you've got a cutscene on the front of that and on the back of that is 3 to 5 minutes, telling more story. You've got multiple characters. You've got characters in different locations.
This is a story game.
It's story heavy. Even for the first like 15 minutes of the game, you're just watching cutscene after cutscene after cutscene.
More than an RPG at the time. Am I wrong?
More than a lot of
That's
them,
ridiculous.
for sure.
Yeah, the stages do get longer later into the game. Like, it starts out with, like, oh, you're being chased by, like, one dude in the first stage. Oh, no. Like, you can take him down with a single trap combo. Of course, that's going to be quick. Then, like, by the end of the game, you're dealing with 5 to 6 enemies at a time. You're dealing with, like, some of them will have, like, 3, 4, 5 life bars you have to go through. The game actually does have boss fights, surprisingly. And some of them do
8 chapters in.
Yeah, at 8 chapters in they start, but some of them are actually, like, really difficult. Like, the first one that you get into is hyper-aggressive and fast. It's really hard to put more than, like, 3 or 4 panels of space in front of him. So you have to be, like, constantly running towards your own traps and setting them off behind you. There's another boss later on who, like, resets your trap cooldown at random. So you have to, like, layer your traps on top of each other to be able to versatilely combo them. And there was one optional boss near the end of the game who can activate your traps whenever she wants to. And can see them and stuff. And you have to figure out how to get her to fall into your traps when she essentially has all the powers you do. It's actually really clever.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. I was thinking, and I didn't get as far as you, I was thinking they could have done a lot more with, like, Zelda style bosses, and like I don't know what that would look like here because you're fighting mostly humans, right? But like I can just imagine like weak points on a larger boss that you have to somehow like creatively, you know, hit a trap with, and then that, you know, goes into phase 2 or something. There was a lot of potential, but it's good to hear that there are some interesting and different mechanics at play later with those bosses.
And it's also interesting that, like, with the bosses and really all the enemies, it's even connected back to that story that Nolan thinks isn't good. Because, like, in a mission, I don't know, mission 6 or 7, you've got a whole new group of people coming after you. They might be bounty hunters that are just coming to collect the prize for your head. They might be just people that are treasure seekers that are coming to the mansion to, like, try to find, like, treasure that's buried there, and they come across you. You've even got some, I love this, that are cult members. And so, like, because you've got, like, this demonic thing going on, they're actually there to
extract it.
To some degree, like, to worship her, but in doing so by bringing about violence. Like, you've got all of these, and then even the bosses. I know that that first boss you face is kind of the leader of that band of mercenaries that are coming after you for a while. So, like, everything is tied back to this story sure, melodramatic, over the top, silly, but PlayStation 2 2005, like,
sure, and I'm fine with the story itself. They just overfed me. I don't want all that. Like, it's constantly there, and I'm like, I'm here. I like this, and I said in the first play, I really enjoy the setup there. I like the framing, and, you know, that's cool. But come on, give me like 10 total cutscenes in this entire game.
Yeah, the pacing definitely feels a little bit off early. And another thing that can feel a little bit off when you start the game up is just, like, when you figure out a good trap combination, it becomes really tempting to just use that trap combination over and over again.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Like, they give you new stages with new environmental hazards and stuff to play with, and, like, your creativity is what's going to push this game. But I will say that, like I mentioned at the end of the game, there's almost nothing to use as a weapon in the final stage, and everything's got a ton of health, so it kind of falls back into that problem again, which is really unfortunate.
Dustin, do you want to know a small thing that's pretty funny?
Tell me a small thing that's pretty funny.
You know how Carlisle plays PoE and I play PoE?
Yes.
Our starter builds for this league are trap builds. I'm not kidding you.
Yep.
Based on this game?
No,
it
was coincidence.
Coincidence. We even independently decided on our builds, and we ended up with the same one.
Right, it's Trap City. It's the year of the trap.
It's the year of the trap.
Aged.
So we did mention that this game has a whole lot of story and a whole lot of cutscenes, and I have to say that while the, like, visual style and stuff fits very PS2 gothic, the animation felt really like a generation behind to me. I don't know if you guys noticed that in cutscenes, but like characters were barely animated. Their faces had like almost no expression at any time. It was kind of a disappointment.
I agree. And even outside of the cutscenes, they really relied on motion blur to hide animations. So when traps hit, like you said, it freeze frames on enemies. That's fine. But like any sort of like major animation with a trap, super motion blurred to what I think was just to hide a bad animation. And yes, I did feel like this was kind of a gen behind. And this is it felt like PS1 at times. Like it looked like PS2, but there was something about it that was off to me.
I liked most of the character models though. I mean obviously all the girls are ridiculously dressed, but I know that was indicative of some of the games during that time.
Don't hate.
But I like the character models.
I do too.
It's very PS2, maybe late
Sure.
1-2 era, and I've said it before, but like that's my era, that's my console, and so it just brought. I've never played this game before, never knew about it, but
Sure.
it just brought back. I think you even in the first play, Nolan, said something about it reminding you of Final Fantasy during this time.
Yeah, kind of. The character models certainly, and then also lots of Castlevania inspo that I was feeling just in theme. And from what I understand, Trapt was kind of a reset on their presentation. The previous games in the series, I don't think were as gothic or like, anime-esque. I think to a degree they were, but this was kind of a new approach, and I think it was because of, like you're saying, this was of the time. This felt very PS2. This felt very gothic and just kind of like edgy. So, but because of that, I'm with Garlo. It kind of felt a little forced at times. And in the animation specifically for me. But it does look good overall.
I know one of the things that our community were complaining about, and I think people even in 2005 when they played this complained about, were the camera controls. And I didn't. It didn't bother me for a good portion of this game. When I started to get to some smaller areas in the future, it became problematic. I think a lot of people just wanted the option to be able to go into overhead mode even when you're battling, like after
cool.
you set the traps. But you're stuck in this kind of like the camera's behind your character a little bit, and you can move the camera around, but it's kind of slow and it's hard to get it set correctly, and you need to be able to quickly move that thing around to see when you need to set off a trap.
Yeah, they at least made a point to have like very big visual effects on the traps that you can see when an enemy is walking through them because it's disrupting this 3D effect. But also you need to be able to have the camera in a position where you can see, and like that opens up enemies to be able to like sneak around to catch you off guard and stuff, which like that's partially probably a good thing for the survival aspect of the game, but yeah, there's a lot of times where you're just like, please just let me see this, like give me an easier chance to see what I need to see.
Yeah. And I definitely felt the camera, especially it's very sensitive when it comes to the environment that you're in. Small rooms, like you're saying, Dustin, but also staircases too, just destroy the camera and like my perspective. Like often you'll have to like quickly turn around and do the reset to like see in front of you constantly. And I got used to it. I've seen worse cameras, but certainly it is an aging factor here. Because you need to see the environment and the traps where you've put them.
The thing that I think aged most poorly, not only maybe it started off not good either, was I'll connect them, although they're a little bit separate, and then we can talk about both. Is both the text translation and the voice acting. The voice acting is Japanese, which is good, preferable. You don't want. But then the English written translations, both of those are pretty bad. I'll start with the written translation. It's so bad, so much so that within the first like 10 minutes, 5 minutes maybe of the game, they get the lead character's name wrong. Nolan, you came across it and you're like, well, who's Alicia? I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think he was actually talking about Allura and just got the name wrong.
Yeah, it's not that unusual in localization to change a character's name if think about Final Fantasy VI and like they changed Tina. She was originally Tina because Tina's a really common name over here. It doesn't carry the same weight. Similarly, Alicia's a little bit more common than most of the other names in the game. And so they probably did want to change that. But when you keep the Japanese voice acting, it is noticeable.
Yeah, like, and the localization thing, the text thing, always been a problem in gaming. I'm used to it at this point, but the typo just cracked me up. It's not, I guess it is a typo.
Yeah, I have a quote in here of one of the lines is just, "I'll put into the ground."
I'll put into the ground.
That's how somebody threatens you, and I'm pretty sure they an entire word in that sentence.
That's not just a couple times. Like in almost every, like I ended up like looking for it in each cutscene just to see like what was messed up.
It makes you wonder, like did they do this? Did they bring it to the States and we're like, yeah, we shouldn't have done that? Because like, I don't know who this was for. Like this feels so Japanese. Like this feels like a very established Japanese series that we don't need, or the West audience doesn't need.
They made it for the Night Trap fans over here, obviously.
The Night Trap?
So that's a cool one that I'll tell you guys about. Night Trap was a 1992 Sega FMV game where you played basically a dude watching security cameras as this people's house party gets invaded by like blood-stealing vampires, and you have to activate traps to like draw them out. It's entirely pre-recorded, and you're just basically like responding to specific triggers. But yeah, it was FMV. And it's kind of interesting because that's the game that is responsible for the ESRB existing. It was considered so violent at the time that, like, because it was using real people and stuff. And that's one of, like, the two games that I could think of to compare this game to was Night Trap.
Yeah,
and even then, like, an action comparison is very different.
Sure, but I was saying earlier, I haven't played a game like this, and I didn't even know that existed. That's crazy.
Why does that game sound so good?
I know, right?
Oh, it's both very good and very bad.
Yeah. The voice acting, I thought it was fine. It ranges from good and melodramatic to awful and melodramatic. Like everything is over the top, but
it's extremely frequent, like in game.
But don't you want voice acting, or do you want it to just be silent?
I want voice acting in the cutscenes, and sure, I want voice acting in gameplay, but it was the same line 60 times in a sequence, and I'm just like, add another one, one other one.
I appreciated the voice acting. It was sometimes laughable, but I was glad that it was there.
Okay.
So that's graphic music.
Music's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah,
I have no other comments on it.
It's the kind of music where you're like, okay, yeah, this fits the mood. This is fine, and then you turn off the game and you just can't remember it.
Oh yeah,
yes,
no, not at all.
Exactly. I have no insert like an AI generated. You told AI to make a track for Castlevania 64 for all those games of the time, and that's what it sounded like. It's adequate.
But perfectly fine for what they're going for. But, not memorable, not stand out. If in our upcoming Christmas cast, Dan pulls out this an audio clip from here, I'm not going to know that it's connected to this.
Oh,
game.
no, I lose that 100%. I lose that.
Easy. The game, if you want it for your PlayStation 2, you want that spinning disc, is $25 used or $121 new.
Not terrible.
Yeah, I don't imagine it had a particularly big print at the time, so.
Yeah, I would expect it a little more, maybe.
I think I'm reading they printed 12 of these things. So
12 total. Get your hands on the 12.
But affordable, especially if you want it used. You can have one for your console. Oh, and the series continues. Like we already talked about, it's in a part of the Deception series. The most recent game was, I believe, Deception 4: The Nightmare Princess, and that came out in 2015. So it might be a dead series now.
Maybe, but that's a little more. I would have thought that it came out earlier than 2015. Interesting.
Yeah, no, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, and PlayStation Vita.
Cool.
But the new Maiden now has the ability to stamp, stomp, and kick her victims. So that's
Ooh,
nice.
I want to stamp and stomp.
Final thoughts.
At the end of each and every one of our episodes, we determine whether or not the game gets our vote for New Game Plus status. That's our general thumbs up or thumbs down. It does require 2/3 of the vote to swing one way or the other. Garlisle, what are your final thoughts on Trapt?
My first final thought is that this is just the prototype Five Nights at Freddy's is built on.
Okay.
By which I mean you're helpless and have to defend yourself with various mechanisms. But like even saying that, and even having brought up Night Trap earlier, this is a game unlike any game I've ever played. It's a game unlike any game I've ever heard of. Even like if you go outside this series, you won't find another game like it, and that had me really intrigued early. Then, like I mentioned, I start to feel like maybe I'd solved it, and then the enemies started getting smarter, and I started noticing all the intricacies of the physics of the puzzles and stuff, and I was brought back in. The finale kind of sucked some of that fun out, but I have to say, I ended up having a really good time with it. Not maybe initially. Initially, I was feeling like it kind of missed its potential, but no, I really liked this game. I give it a good thumbs up.
Hey.
There we go. Okay.
All right, Nolan, tell him why he's wrong.
I'm really torn, actually.
Interesting.
I ended up actually enjoying the gameplay of this game. It had me laughing, and sometimes that can be enough for me. And I mentioned it earlier. I absolutely love the simplistic approach of you have 3 buttons. There's, of course, more depth there with positioning and all kinds of stuff, but it felt really good once you start to get the hang of it. The major issue for me was that I would need to do survival mode in order to really enjoy the game, which is a different mode in the game we didn't talk about, separate from story, because the story is a distraction. It's too much for me. I don't need it. And since Kenny's not here, I'll need to do a Kenny analogy in his absence to describe what I mean.
Great.
So the story was my little brother this week. I don't have one, but if I had one, constantly peeking his head into my room, trying to hang out with me, and all I want to do is chill and play Steam Deck. But our mom makes me hang out with my little brother, so I have to sit there and listen to him talk about nothing. No NGP, bad execution, weird ASS game.
That is 1 thumbs up, 1 thumbs down. Comes down to me. I'll give an illustration, an analogy, if you would. This is like my big brother. I don't have one. Who I would peek into his room and want to hang out with him, and he allowed me to. Because I just liked spending time with him. Whereas Nolan doesn't want cutscenes and wants to get back to the gameplay. I'm all about story. I could play an entire game. In fact, I just recently did with my wife, Immortality, where it's just story. I mean, it's basically just story. You're just watching stuff. I grew up on Final Fantasies where I would get 30-minute cutscenes sometimes.
Better stories than this.
Oh, for sure, but also not from Tecmo Super Bowl or whatever the creators of the football
Tecmo
game did. And so I went into this game entirely skeptical. I started this game entirely skeptical. And it grew on me unexpectedly, like throughout the week, where I was enjoying it and starting to figure out and traps and find out ways to do this, and finding those. Nolan, I wish you knew about more or did some research on the dark illusions, so that because that was the fun for me, going into a new room and trying to get this dark illusion to set off, because they're absolutely insane.
Those are the summons of the game?
Yeah, absolutely. The summons of the game. This is the Knights of the Round. I had so much fun this week. There are some glaring flaws with this game and its presentation, but there are so few games like it that I would certainly tell you to pick up a copy and play this game because it's absolutely absurd. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, which means
okay.
that Trapt is New Game Plus certified.
By the way, Kenny would have 100% given this game New Game Plus.
Yeah, I think
Just
he
saying.
would have done something similar.
So, same situation.
What did you think? We had votes come in on our YouTube poll. 6% said yes, it's worth playing today. Half of that, 3%, said no, go play something else. And 90% have never played it before, which of course.
Of course.
That's going to be
But
one of the
it's-
highest unknown games we've ever had.
Oh, yeah.
But and also, it came out in the States, too. It's not like, it was a Japan exclusive. It wasn't.
You're right.
That's
Like,
crazy.
We've had
That's-
Japan exclusives that have been played more than this one.
That's zero marketing. That's zero exposure. How, dude, they lost money for sure. They lost money doing this one.
We had many in our community play along and write in their thoughts. Zothotep said, I had this game as a child and I loved it back then, though I fully admit that it's not for everyone. While the traps are interesting with being stuck in the same castle, something that later games in the Tecmo's Deception series will fix, but since they don't have that here, that's obviously a problem. Also, I love how the game has multiple endings. Anyway, this may be nostalgia talking, but I give this NGP and hope we get more of the series, with the latest being on the PS4.
So is one of the endings like
Oh.
the demon? You're gonna finish the game, really? No, is it the demon like wins and takes over your body?
I do
completely?
know one of the endings is triggered by losing to the final boss, so I'll leave it at
That's
that.
easy.
I
That's the speed
do,
run route.
I do like the concept where you're kind of the bad guy. Like, what video games allow you to do that, you know?
Apparently, the earlier titles, your enemies are more innocent. Like in this game, they present them as baddies, like to help, like with I think our audience. But in the earlier ones, no, you're like killing innocent people for a demon.
Wow. Logan said, between the terrible name and the weird genre mashup, this game will probably earn an eyebrow raise from most people. But despite my apprehension, I found it a unique and rewarding game experience. It's not a perfect game.
Wow.
The third-person aspect of the experience feels a bit half-baked and can be awkward to control, but underneath the rough edges, there's some one-of-a-kind fun. Each room is full of lots of environmental traps and often some hidden ones, so you keep challenging yourself to set up a new elaborate combo with the traps you set down manually. Additionally, the package surrounding the gameplay is well done, containing some weird and funny one-liners and a decently interesting story. Getting to create some Rube Goldberg trap combos to elaborately capture souls is not a game experience I've ever had before, so I think it's worth people checking out.
That's the thing. I think it's so unique.
Yeah.
I want to, and I do love a lot of aspects of it, but it really was one thing that kept me from going all in.
Yeah. Jopikoira said, the visuals immediately remind me of so many games from the early 2000s that came from Japan. They probably shared a game engine or staff because the character models, fluid animations, and the 2D graphics are so similar to games like Shadow Hearts and Tenchu Wrath of Heaven. The gameplay is unique. After a while, it gets a bit boring, especially if you play all the side stories too. The game keeps throwing curveballs, but I'd wish more variance and maybe more twist in the side stories as they're optional. It also makes me wonder if this would be a hit if they had ditched the idea of making an M-rated game and instead had made a more colorful, cartoony version with the same gameplay. It could have even featured a multiplayer mode where the players would either try to trap each other or where one is a trap master and the other tries to get to them. All in all, the game is a neat idea, mediocre execution, no pun intended, and gratuitous violence that makes the game not NGP worthy, but fine, and I'll check out the sequels.
I will not be checking out the sequels.
I might.
Nolan,
I feel
you
like
thought it was
Carlisle's
too...
gonna play all of them.
I mean,
No,
if one of
he's,
them's on the PS4.
I know. That's
Garlisle's
pretty
still on
easy to play.
Yakuza, right?
Oh, yes, that too.
Traveling
Nice.
through
I
the
approve of that one.
series. And then finally, Clint said, this game is super neat. It's a special treat to get a cool genre combo like this as an action platformer, as action platformer puzzlers aren't exactly common. The only other one that comes to mind is Catherine, a very excellent and similarly story-centric title from Atlas.
Yeah.
I have over a decade of experience with this kind of gameplay from the tower defense games, so I was right at home. The story is much better than I was expecting for a game like this, and there's a ton of intrigue here that makes it clear to me why there are more titles after this one in the series. For the downsides, the lack of full voice acting was a little disappointing, though I can't totally fault the game for it. I can absolutely see the gameplay loop getting tiring, though I feel like there's enough enemy variety to keep it abated for most players. There's a lot here that I like, and it says a lot that I went into this one with a bit of a sour mood and yet still came away looking to return to it. This one is certainly a good PS2 game I missed out on.
This is a Glenn game for sure. It makes sense that he likes it.
Nolan, you're in the minority here.
I know, that's really shocking to me. I'm literally the odd one out here. There was one person that gave no new NGP, but they were like, it's amazing. I don't know.
Show us your face win. It's really good.
Thanks.
Especially for our audio podcast listeners.
They heard my face.
Thank you. As always, for sending in your thoughts on the Retro Game of the Week, you can do that every week to ngppodcast@gmail.com, or do it where most people do it and drop in their commentary in our commentary section on Discord. Garlisle has been doing that without fail for the last how many games?
Almost half the length of this podcast now. I checked, and
my
like 366 or something is when I'll have been with you guys half the time. And then, yeah, Glenn, we don't shut it out enough, but Glenn has also been playing along for like over 100 episodes now. And there's a few
Even
other
when he
people
doesn't want to.
Yeah, and there's a few other people that seem to be joining that train too recently. So like,
I love it.
Yeah, it's great to have all those people playing along to talk with.
Love it.
Yeah,
one of my goals for 2023 is to have 10 people that are playing every single game with us without fail.
10?
I don't know. Just yeah, sure.
Rise up, gamers.
Rise up. All right. So believe it or not, we are moving away from Trapt this week and randomly selecting, but not from our massive retro master list, because it is time for another Patreon poll.
Garlisle got to do the echo. I knew this was coming and I forgot, so I'm excited again.
Yeah, the fun thing about this is we're playing it for 2 weeks, because next week is our Christmas cast.
I know, and because of that, I'm going to need to hear a couple of the things we have, because I'm nervous that someone's going to troll us for 2 straight weeks, which is rough.
There's a lot of interesting games in here. I'll tell you, the game that was submitted most included our third host here today included this game. Is Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney for the NDS.
NDS, sure. We'll call it the NDS.
We've also got some games like, I'm just saying lots of Phoenix Wright. We've got Castlevania Aria of Sorrow and The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap, submitted by Super Gamer Guy.
Love.
We've got Paper Mario for the Nintendo 64, submitted by Shane.
Ooh.
We've got the original Castlevania, submitted by Casey.
You say Castlevania.
Instead of what?
Castlevania?
What about Castlevania?
No one says it.
Okay. We've got Mother 3, submitted by Retro Man, which would be interesting and fun. It's been a long time since we've been in that series.
Yes.
And then Kakeo-san said The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap and Metroid Zero Mission.
Beautiful submissions. I'm loving all of this. I'd be fine with any of those, but I know there's a stinker. I know it.
There might be a couple, but there's some really solid entries in this,
really
in
solid.
This one. And which is good, because we're playing it 2 weeks, and this is the final game that we're playing in 2022.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And it's either going to ruin Christmas or make it great.
And
again,
we said this in the Patreon poll, so our VIP know about this, but you might not know about it yet. For the recording of this game, Nolan, Dustin, and Kenny will be physically present together.
My timing's so off. Yeah, you're right. All those things are true. That's super hype.
And instead of setting up a recording studio like we did last time we were together, we're going to be recording side by side from the safety of Kenny's bed. Should we?
I don't think he gave us the sign off.
Should we try to do that
under the covers?
All right. Yeah. After there's tons of other games in there. Thank you for all of our patrons for submitting their games. Randomizing now. We are going to be playing a game from the year 2001.
Good.
Okay.
Any more information I give is going to give it away to certain individuals. It is a visual novel adventure game developed by Capcom.
Y'all got it.
Originally for the Game Boy Advance, and then a few years later for the Nintendo DS.
Oh, I didn't.
And if it's the game I'm thinking of, it was not originally released in English until the Nintendo DS.
Got it. Makes sense.
That is correct. That is correct. So we'll be playing the DS version. Is that correct, Garlisle, if it is the game you're thinking?
Yeah, sure. Any version will be valid. They're pretty identical.
The game that we are playing for the next 14 days is Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney.
Oh, yeah.
Y'all got your wish.
Yeah, Merry Christmas Eve, but it's not Christmas, everyone.
That's a quote from the game.
Yep.
So this is our first Phoenix Wright game. It was numbers won out on this one. I believe it was submitted some like close to 20 times. So like,
whoa,
a lot of people hopped in on this one.
Okay, not every, but most DS games we've touched on the podcast have ended up being hits for us. And Layton was the most recent example that's very similar to this, right, Garlisle? It's like similar style of game.
It's so similar that they've actually had a crossover game.
Yeah. So I'm pumped. I've always wanted to try out the series. And do you think this is the best entry point, or in your opinion, or?
They are more or less like chronological sequels to each other, so this is definitely the best starting point. And it was good enough. First one? Yes, and it was a good enough game that like the most recent entry came out this year. So it's still going.
I'm pumped. I am pumped.
Lawyer up and play along with us. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney.
Better call Phoenix Wright. You join our Discord server, would you? We got a commentary channel where you can leave your thoughts on the game of the week. We might read it on the show. And we have plenty of other channels with a lot of chatters, a lot of people that have similar interests as you. So go to discord.gg/New Game Plus.
Yeah, and while you're at it, if you feel like going a little bit above and beyond, feel free to come join us. We have a ton of people financially supporting the show over on patreon.com/New Game Plus. You can join our growing list of patrons like Beatmore, Astral Soul, MacMorph, and Proto Dad's Dojo all did this week.
Welcome.
Ooh, welcome.
Yeah, you can go a little bit above and beyond and join the massive list of producers we have of Adam, Alex, Amarley, and Antonin, Van Brunk, D.H. Bowser, Ellis, Francesca, Gimbin, J. Robert, Jared, Joey, Jordan, Justin, Clen, Knickknack, Corey, Lawe, Mal, Maxima, Mr. Lattes, Sajins, Shauna, Subsonic Demon, Tazelhoff, Thomas, Unbelievable, William, and Zion. Dear Lord, that's a lot of you. You can also join the list of directors with myself, Brojim, Daniel, Shane, Super Hypered, and The Tasty Yogurt. Or you can even become a brand new director like George did this week.
Whoa, new director? Big.
Very big. And a special thank you to Garlisle for coming on. We've never done something like this, and it was a joy to have you sit in Kenny's chair this week. So thank you for doing that.
It was
keeping it warm.
It was great to be here. Thank you for having me.
You can follow us on our social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, or YouTube. The links are in the show notes. Listen directly on any podcast provider of your choice. Make sure you subscribe so that you are the first to get new NGP episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a kind rating and review. Our video episode was edited by our friend Dylan on a new laptop. Our audio episode was edited and produced by our friend Dan Willett. Join us next week for our Christmas cast, and the week after as we play Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. Until then, I'm still Alice. Is that what they called her one time?
I'm still Allura.
I'm Alicia.
Oh, Alicia. Well, I'm Alice.
But you're Alice, so.
And this has been New Game Plus.